What's the worst punishment ever received as a child? Story 1. I got the wooden spoon a lot, and once my mom was so angry, not particularly at me, just in general, which is more messed up, that she threw a porcelain teapot at the back of my head while I was going down the stairs. But the scariest beating I saw happened to my best friend in high school. We were supposed to be having a sleepover at her house, but instead we went out and partied till 3 a.m. When we got to her house, her dad was up, I'm pretty sure he was drunk, and he was angry. He beat her with a field hockey stick for what seemed like forever. She was in bad shape. Suffice to say, I never slept over there again. For everyone asking if I called the cops or reported her dad, 2 things. I was 15 years old and never experienced anything like that in my life. I was definitely in shock and scared for my life as this was unfolding. Obviously, that's not an excuse. I later mentioned to her that I was thinking about telling someone, but she begged me not to, as her mom was not in the picture and she was the only one taking care of her younger brother, and did not want to be separated from him. She moved out with her brother as soon as we graduated high school. My cousin has her wooden spoon on her wall to remind her, never again. She never beat her kids, but they know all about the wooden spoon. Also had a similar experience with a friend, except I was on vacation with them. We got caught smoking cigarettes. Her father beat the crap out of her with a belt, then locked us in separate rooms for 3 days. We were like 13. Jesus Christ, I forgot about that. Nothing like the internet to bring up repressed memories. I'm sorry you went through that. Did you ever tell your parents? My mom would often just scream and shout at me because people in her life were stressing her out. Like she'd be talking to the utility company and they were being hard to handle, so she'd get frustrated and just start shouting at me. And being a kid, I had no idea that it wasn't me she was mad at, since I asked her to stop and she just kept going. On the bright side, I can socially manhandle anybody who shouts and screams since I basically ignore it. Folks who do that aren't used to people just steamrolling them and dismissing whatever power they've got. But it does mean my brain kinda shuts off when somebody shouts at me in anger. I just can't take them or what they're saying seriously and instinctively want to dismiss it and them as human beings. Story 2. Either the cigarette burns to my scalp or the days without food because I misbehaved. My parents were, and still are, meth addicts. Screw them. Geez, I hope you don't have to deal with them anymore. I cut them off years ago. My mother occasionally sends me a text message saying, "Happy birthday, I love you," and I'm wondering if she's sober since she got the date right this year. My dad, well, I haven't talked to him in 15 years. He came into a place I used to work a few years back and stood about 3 feet away from me and didn't even recognize me. So I guess that's a win. Good for you. Sorry if there's downsides, but I'm glad you're safe and independent now. My stepbrother punched me in the face and gave me a bloody lip. My stepmother decided as a punishment, she would hit us both with a belt. I don't know why I was in trouble for getting punched, but she held on to the end of the belt with the holes and swung the belt buckle at us. It hit the back of my right hand, and I still feel the pain in the back of my hand when I squeeze something with it. I got punished for getting punched in the face. I still don't understand what I did wrong 23 years later. You didn't do anything wrong. Your stepmother is evil and a moron. I hope she gets a hefty dose of karma. Oh, don't worry, she will, when it's time to choose her nursing home. Hands tied behind my back with a belt so I couldn't cover myself, and then beat about the face, neck, and shoulders with another belt for several minutes. Dad was a real piece of crap. Thanks for the kind words. Life got better. See, that's not a punishment. That's flat-out abuse. Just about everything in this thread is abuse. I say this phrase enough for it to be depressing, but punishment shouldn't be creative. Once you reach that point, it stops being about discipline and more about being sadistic. Seriously, that stuff is dark. Makes me really appreciate how sane my parents are. Story 3. Definitely the buck rag. I still feel sick thinking about it. For those who don't know, a buck rag is a rag that's been rubbed all over a male goat in rut. It's used for some goat breeding purposes. Lady goats love the smell. In our town, some parents would buy these rags from goat farmers to punish children for misbehaving. You take the child out back, pull the rag out of the jar, drape it over the child's face, and tie a knot in the back. It's not dangerous, but it makes them smell the horrible goat odor. I never saw what the big deal was until I was buck-ragged as a 16-year-old girl for cursing out my parents. I puked a lot. Oh, that's freaking barbaric. This sounds like a punishment in a fairy tale, like the mask was enchanted to smell awful all the time, and if you were a bad little boy, it would stay on you forever. When little Timmy told his dad to screw himself one day, his father wasn't even mad. He sent him out to play. "I can't believe he didn't yell," the boy exclaimed, content, until a certain smell arrived, a certain noxious scent. He mumbled softly, "What the duck?" He slowly stepped inside, and Timmy's father whispered, "Buck," and Timmy freaking died. Story 4. My mother canceled my birthday 1 year ago. I was being a mouthy little doo-doo and didn't believe she would follow through once she presented it as a potential consequence for my behavior. Turns out my mother doesn't make empty threats. No gifts were received, and I sat there while she called my friend's parents to say the party was off. I think the other mothers were mortified, but I got the gifts she sent back a month later for Christmas, and I learned a few lessons. I wish all the bad punishments here were more like that one. Perfect use of discipline without abusing the power difference of an adult onto a child. It's not abusive or torturous. It was made known before the misbehavior was done, and the child chose to test it anyway, knowing full well a potential punishment. Healthy cause and effect. The stories I'm reading on here are 100% abuse and torture and somewhat sadistic. It's hard to believe folks can grow up and be perfectly okay after enduring that. Like, my kids lose tablets and toys temporarily and gain chores. They're 7 and 3.5, like dish duty, wiping down bathrooms and sinks, vacuuming the rooms, etc. But darn, the kneeling on rice, spikes behind the heels, hands bound and getting your face and neck whipped with a belt, that's absolute torture. Dedication and surely a life lesson. Story 5. Not me, but my son actually. He's a little fella, as are his mother and myself. She would force him to drink nothing but Pediasure with every meal and go ballistic when he would not be able to finish the terrible frozen meal she made him. She sent a message to me saying that he was hiding food he didn't want to eat and that she beat his butt and I should expect bruising. The next day, my father picked him up and dropped him off to my girlfriend at our house. After dinner, she went to put him in the shower and was horrified at what she saw. Imagine a tiny 7-year-old boy with a completely bruised butt. And I mean deep purple, yellow, and green bruises. She called me immediately. I rushed home from work, calling the police on my way. A sergeant from my local police department was very helpful and supportive to my little boy, told me what to file and how to file it, and that I should rush to the children's hospital. He also called his lifelong best friend, who's a captain in the town where my ex-wife lives. Within 2 weeks, I had full emergency custody, and she had domestic violence charges. Fast forward a year, and I'm a sole custodial parent, and my son is thriving. He's gained almost 20 pounds, can now ride a bike without training wheels. He could not ride one at all when we took custody. Good food, positive attention, and lots of love have helped him grow tremendously. Well done. Your son is lucky to have you. Story 6. When I was around 6 years old, my stepdad woke me up in the night by pulling me out of the bed and yelling that I had peed on the toilet seat. He took me out on the front porch, and while he was paddling me, the rail I was bracing against broke, and I fell off the porch. My mom used to do the whole waking me up in the middle of the night for some perceived wrongdoing stuff. She would suddenly and loudly throw my door open, turn on the light, and drag me out of bed at all hours. I'm pretty sure I'm a light sleeper and regularly wake up startled because of that. I'm 40. I swore I would never do that stuff to my kids. It makes me sad to know others have experienced this, or much, much worse. For those who asked, I'm fine, aside from the sleep stuff, and some pretty intense anxiety that's gotten better with age. I actually have a very good relationship with my mom. We've talked about it over the years, and I understand that, like many others her age, she's a product of their upbringing. My kids are 20, 14, 13, and 13, and to this day, I have never done that. I am, however, probably a terrible parent in 100 other ways. Kidding. Virtual hugs to you all. Story 7. 7 years old. I wouldn't move my hands from my butt, so my mom dragged me to the bathroom. While there, she lifted me up by my legs and attempted to give me a swirly. My hands immediately latched onto the toilet bowl to stop my head from falling in. Then my mom freed up one of her hands to turn my butt red. After a few hits, my arms gave out and my head dropped hard into the toilet water. After that, she yelled at me for 5 more minutes and ordered me to take a shower. She still denies doing this or any of the other corporal punishment my sister and I were subjected to, aware what they do. Classic gaslighting. They always do that. I'm still to meet a mother that remembers how she beat her kids. Story 8. I told my brother to screw off. I turned around to a 2x4 to the chest, then spent 8 hours total picking up tiny butt rocks out of the yard and putting them in a bucket. When the bucket was full, my dad would walk around the yard throwing them around, then I'd pick them back up again. For those asking, a 2x4 is a piece of wood used in construction. If you were to open the walls of your house, many of you would find 2x4s cut into 8 or 9 feet lengths used to frame your house, apartment, or dwelling. Holy cow, you got hit in the chest with a 2x4 because your dad swung it at you? I keep thinking these are all so horrible. Then I remember that my dad choked and slammed me against a wall because I didn't get along with my insane mother. That, and they would take away Little League years as punishment for small offenses, instead of admitting they couldn't afford it. And that's all without mentioning the nearly daily spankings from the time I could remember until I was in high school. No wonder it's taken years and years to work out all the weird stuff in my head. Story 9. My uncle would have me stand T-pose and hold books. Not too bad. Then I have to stand on my toes. Then he would put nails sticking up under my heels. He would dare me to relax. On a related note to my uncle, he also chased me and my cousin, his own child, with a BB gun and shot at us. He eventually hit my cousin in the eye. The BB got stuck on his eyelid, so thankfully there was very minimal damage to his eyeball. Is that a punishment or an attempt by an uncle to violate a Geneva Convention? That's clearly sadism. It's a stupid punishment because it takes long and forces you to constantly watch to make sure they don't cheat. It only makes sense for a sadist because they enjoy watching it and don't want it to be over fast. Just to add, you don't need the Geneva Convention. The Convention on the Rights of the Child protects children worldwide. It was signed by all eligible states except the USA. Story 10. When I was young and taking interest in girls, my parents made a rule with no girls over at the house alone with me, even to study with all doors open, no locks. This all happened after I got caught in a compromising situation with my girlfriend at church. Went on like that for a while until I was 14 or 15. A friend of mine who was on the weightlifting team was over at my house one day. He was changing in my room and my parents walked in with him in his boxers and me sitting on my bed. I still remember that moment. They both paused to look at each other and it got weird for a couple of days. When they finally said something, it was very positive towards me seeing women, got a lock on my door, and girls were very welcome in the house alone with me. Even got a few, "Why don't you ever bring that one girl around more often?" My parents really didn't want me to be gay. How ironic, they banned girls, but they don't want you to be gay. Well, it worked out fine for the Catholic Church. Not for the boys, though. Story 11. So my dad found an old wooden hockey stick that was thrown away. He saw it and thought it'd make a great weapon to beat us with. He called it Mr. Sticko, and he broke my back for something I did. That one really sucked. Hey guys, thank you so much for the well wishes and Cake Day shoutouts. They mean a lot. So my dad and I are actually kind of good. We obviously don't have a great relationship, but growing up in a community where my friends had it just as bad, it never seemed weird until I left. I got much needed therapy and anger management to learn how to solve my issues without violence. Thank you again. Naming the weapon used to abuse your children just seems so darn creepy to me. I don't know why. Your dad sounds like a Mr. Pricko. Ah yes, child abuse. Story 12. I was driven about 30 minutes outside of my city to an isolated, large, and creepy-looking building, which I was told was an orphanage. I was given the choice of telling the truth and admitting to something I had not done, or being left there. I'm 38 and still think about this from time to time. Update, not to excuse what they did, but my mom and dad both had horrible upbringings with abusive parents. My dad was full of anger, and my mom was rather weak and full of shame. I started therapy about 5 years ago and was reaching a point where I was going to decide whether to confront my parents with how I felt about my childhood or cut them from my life. Then my dad passed away. My dad always told my brother and I that he was going to have cops take us away because he hated us. Gotta love those long-term crippling fears of abandonment. Story 13. My dad once told me that if I let the word poop cross my lips again, I would truly have poop cross my lips. I didn't listen and said it again that night, and he took a piece of fresh dog dew and made me hold it in my tongue for 30 seconds. I cried and never cursed again until I was 21. That's a literal health hazard right there. That's what I told him. He felt bad even as he was doing it, but he said he never lied, and when he made a promise, he had to follow through with it. I told him it wasn't safe, and he said, "We just had the dog checked for diseases and parasites. You're going to be okay. I hate to do this, but if you really want that word in your mouth, you need the real thing." Honestly, that's messed up. Not even the punishment, but the extreme reaction to swearing. Everyone swears. You're in for a world of shock when you enter the real world if you're anti-swearing. It's a word. You hear that, YouTube? Story 14. I was in kindergarten and I had peed myself because I was having too much fun watching a movie in class. The teacher put me in the bathroom with the lights out and door closed for the rest of the movie, 45 minutes or so, and it was storming really badly outside. I'm still afraid of the dark and loud noises. Punishing a child for having an accident just makes it worse. My mom used to punish my sister and I whenever we wet the bed or had an accident. I got over it eventually, but my sister wet the bed for years after she was potty trained. Mom would make us wear a diaper or tell people we weren't potty trained. She was basically trying to shame us into not having accidents. Story 15. I grew up with my grandma, and I can't exactly remember what I did, but next thing I know, she's laying a pile of uncooked rice in the corner to kneel on for 10 minutes. It felt like I was kneeling in a gravel driveway with charred rocks. Forgot about the time she threw me outside in the snow in my boxers and locked the door. I was 8. I've heard of this one at least. I saw it on Law & Order episodes. The kids had scars all over their legs and what appeared to be grains of rice embedded in their knees. Looked pretty brutal. Did Stabler angrily skirt the edges of law to bring the perp to justice? Story 16. I pooed my pants in the 4th grade. I don't know why, but I had a condition that made me hold it all in and not use a toilet. This has been going on and off my entire life, not a problem anymore. My dad was furious. I remember being naked in my bedroom with my dad. My dirty underwear was on the floor, and my dad had a hard grip on my arm while he screamed and yelled at me. He yelled at me things like, "How old are you? No one's going to want to be your friend," and "You're disgusting." He then beat me with his belt. My dad worked at a flour mill and spent his days stacking 100-pound flour bags 10 high, so he was built like a freaking Hulk. He would then rub my poop-filled underwear in my face, making me look at it and smell it. Story 17. The pointless ones. We had landscaping rocks in our yard from an unfinished project. They were probably 30 pounds each. After a number of other punishments failed, my parents came up with a move rocks punishment. I'd have to move 30 or so of these rocks 50 yards, set them up into a particular shape, square, circle, etc., have my parents check them, and then move them all back. The pointlessness of it all was the worst. They did things like that to people in concentration camps, just a worthless task over and over. I'll never forget learning that. Story 18. I was bad at school, so my mom took all of my furniture, literally all of it. I had to sleep and eat on the floor for a week. She did let me keep my favorite blanket, though. Edit. My parents aren't abusive, and also, I'm a girl, you freaking carrot munchers. My parents did this too when I was a kid, for weeks at a time, except they let me keep my mattress and blanket. Even the decorations were taken off my walls. No stimulation except for homework, and once that was finished, I just stared off into space or made imaginary stories in my head or slept. Story 19. Got put on restriction for 6 months for doing something my mom said I could do, but then she said she never gave me permission to do it, even though another adult was sitting there and confirmed he heard her give me permission to do it. Also had to pick up all the rocks in the vacant lot next to our house and put them in a pile on weekends as part of the punishment. What was that something? Rode my bike to the library. Story 20. Probably getting strangled by my dad after I stormed away from the dinner table while yelling that I hated eating with my parents because all they did was yell and curse at one another. Strangling sucks. Around the time I was 12 or 13, my stepdad strangled me with my little cousins downstairs simply because I was annoying him. I honestly didn't think I was going to make it. He did a lot of crummy things, but that was the worst. Story 21. My sister cheated on a paper, so all 4 of us lost computer privileges for a month. Collective punishment just isn't effective or fair. It's also a war crime. To be fair, a lot of what's in this thread could be war crimes. Story 22. When I was 8 years old, I had every dish in the house thrown at me, including a loaf of bread. I was then locked outside till midnight. I was first put out in the morning. Once I was left out front, the 4-year-old me thought, I'm going to go over there. They couldn't find me because I was going to the park, down the road, on my own, in the cold. I can't even imagine letting either of my kids, 3 and 5, out of the house on their own. Story 23. A butt whooping from dad. His grip and my trying to run broke my arm. How was that explained to the doctor? I fell off my bike. So that's why the nurses separated my whole family to ask each of us exactly how my sibling broke an arm as a toddler. They really did just fall off a chair though. Story 24. Probably when my mom spanked me with the back of her favorite hairbrush, then the hairbrush broke and I got spanked some more because that was her favorite hairbrush. That's messed up. At least my mom stopped and called it if she broke the wooden spoon. Once I made the mistake of saying the spanking didn't hurt, it sure hurt the next time. Story 25. Just predicting this thread gonna have a lot of straight-up torture in it. I think you mean enhanced punishment techniques, also known as character-building procedures, or as masochists refer to it as erotic time. Story 26. That was me. My parents noticed I wasn't crying after being spanked, so obviously we didn't spank you hard enough, and spanked me more. They wonder why crocodile tears as a kid became a reflex when getting in trouble. Please leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to make a video of them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.